Zach a hard time because he puts his headphones on backwards all the time.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, Michael, because I want to give you a hard time as we kick up this podcast episode. I want to open up to the group.
Good. So we're going. This is it.
Are we good to go?
Yeah, I think this is it. We're live.
Someone did mention Jonathan as being pretentious.
Not just someone's.
Multiple persons.
But I own it as the primary person doing such things, yes. But I think in this case it was you, right?
I feel like we should talk about, people throw around in politics the term Nazi a lot. I don't know if you're a green screen Nazi, or we had a lot of text. Jonathan, very accommodating.
I tried to offer a lot of options. It was a gray wall with backpack hooks, a large whiteboard, filled bookshelves, a large gray section, but it's in a hallway, about 14 feet of gray in a classroom, and it turns out gray is not the thing.
Gray is actually meh, in the words of Michael Mott. Like, thanks for your 18 suggestions.
I feel like
meh.
I'm getting
I made
up
so
on
many
here.
concessions, so many options that we had.
Honestly, what got me too is not just like, hey, gray's not going to work, we need green. Gray is a tone, not a hue. Yes. We need a close approximation. That's what gets me more than anything.
Flabbergasted. Like, I never know until I talk to Michael, like, categories of colors in this regard. Like, I thought I'd really advanced the human when I understood, like, pastels as an option. And then you're coming in strong with, like, hues versus, what was the other one?
Tones.
I'm like, what in the world?
Values. I think actually the word is value. But, if we had Chloe here, she could tell us. But have you ever picked a color, like a custom color out in like RGB land, and you like pick the color and then you have this slider that go up from white down to like black with that hue? So because of that, gray is in every single color to a degree for a computer, because how it represents a color, it's splitting it up into RG and B. And so if you try to remove gray from a background, you remove it from everything, and then you just get floating heads.
I did this the other day at home groups. I asked Michael like a question. I wanted a yes or no answer, and got like this big thing on elves and D&D, and I was like, that's on me. I asked him. I should have known it was coming back that way. But it's great. Color
and particularly when it comes to colors, you're kind of bearding the line in this den here. You know what I mean? Because I entered into the wheelhouse of the guy who deals with all that stuff, and I was just trying to figure out what shirt to wear. You know what I mean?
That was the whole thing. The shirt situation was so funny.
And so naturally I settled on this one, so I look a bit like Grimace from the McDonald's commercials.
I'm a little bit disappointed Matt's wearing a shirt. I thought it would be shirts and skins for this podcast.
By the way, if we were green screening, purple is a perfect color.
It's good. See, there we go. And that's why, but however,
it's 2 steps ahead.
I live, like, this hot mic scares me to begin with, because I say a lot of things, and heaven only knows when I'm going to say something stupid. But then, like, I also now came in, and between you, like, giving me the business about shirt choice, and over here, like, I've just been pretty terrified this whole time. So I started off uncomfortable, which is a good time.
Oh man, that's good.
I think that's a great way to jump into more politics talk.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes politicians get ambushed from both sides. That's what's happened to me.
Here we go.
So.
It's great. I know we're going to do maybe another episode. Is it like, do we keep doing the twangy music thing with the
I thought
OG?
Maybe we'd have Jonathan say fire up that twangy music one
and we
time.
can compare it.
Yeah.
Or if you have the spirit, comes to you with some other phrase, feel free.
Whatever you might say, like, in true Shakespearean.
Oh, that's true. It's got to be
I need a sonnet, dear sir. I need a sonnet.
I think twangy was probably a word Shakespeare would appreciate a lot.
Yeah. There we go.
Yeah.
Good night. Okay, there we go. There's the English teacher coming out.
So waiting on you, Jonathan.
Are we going to fire up?
So
that
I got
twangy
my
music?
apologies. Okay, we don't do that. Okay, my apologies. I got to get it started. Let's take it to the next level.
Fire up that twangy music.
Let's fire up that twangy music.
From the hearts of the Low Country in South Carolina.
It's the Take Two podcast, where we take theology to the next level. Episode 2 of our government roundtable, politics roundtable. We answered a number of questions last time. Well,
did we answer them?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. We talked about a number of questions. And we were looking over these questions. There's probably some overlap here if we had a Venn diagram and we mathed it out.
Yep.
First one, should Christians be more concerned with processes or outcomes? And when I think of this, I think I helped write some of these questions. And for me, I think certain taxes are immoral. and so they should be done away with. And then I go, oh, but will that hurt the outcome? Even though I believe in this process, I believe that this is wrong. Should I stand for that process, or should I, go for what has the best outcome? Which kind of a little bit goes to our discussion of utilitarianism. I was thinking of utilitarianism last episode as far as, getting a person in with that has your similar view of policy. But now we're talking about what should your actual policy be, something that you think, actually works out. I'll just throw that out and be quiet.
You want to start us off there, sir?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you got one of my favorite verses down there underneath that one, Micah 6:8. Matt likes what's before it.
Yes, I absolutely do. When they're just like, how many sacrifices can we bring to God to make us just in His sight? And they're like, do we need 1,000 or whatever that is? Yeah, that's me. And then it's just you. Let's get a flowery coffee cup first here. Go ahead, dear sir.
Should Christians be more concerned with processes or outcomes? Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
100%.
I like it.
In teaching, there's a certain stage in which the process is more important than the outcome. In a certain developmental stage of learning, that process becomes more important. And I know I'm going to freak some people out because they have these conceptions about Common Core, the new maths and all the things about, well, it doesn't really matter where you end up. It's just you got to work on the process, and that's not where I'm going. But it's probably,
I was ready to ride this train wherever it went.
It's probably not a fair conception of what Common Core is.
Particularly when you say it with that tone. Yeah.
But there is a level, like I said, in education, there are some times where the process is more significant than the outcome. When you're teaching certain writing skills and working through certain things, when you pull that out into kind of more real world settings, I don't know how to really work through that. Does anybody have a good framework for thinking through that?
I don't, but I want to give another example that came to my mind, because I think what you said is so good that sometimes they're so connected. You can't just go one way or the other. That's what makes it hard. The 76ers, basketball, famously would say trust the process, and they would intentionally do poorly to get really high draft picks for like many years in a row, saying, hey, in the long run, it's going to work. Just the process. We're
They
losing.
were like bringing in roofers to play point guard. It was a good time.
It was abysmal. So people hated it, but the administration, the leadership was like, just trust the process.
Did they win a championship after it?
No, because what it taught the culture was that you shouldn't try hard. And even though they had talented players, some of their top draft picks honestly had maybe a little bit of a competitive problem to some extent, where it's like our culture is losing, like the process is teaching us to lose. And then Embiid had injury things. So it's not all that, but it's like a case study.
But then if you try to swap, so that if you have changed your cultural ethos to, we are going to do poorly for a while so that we can do great later.
Yes.
You have a hard time once you've established that culture to then go, all right, now it's time to be great.
Yes,
right.
Exactly.
Listen to me talking about basketball.
I know. I was down for that, and that's why I turned and looked at him. I'm like, this is sports. You ready to go, big dog? Because I'm here for it. That's 76ers. I was going to tell you that was basketball.
One example I was thinking of is Carter administration. I was born during the Carter administration. The Carter administration was single-handedly responsible, as much as an administration can be, for my father losing 2 different jobs from the economy downfall. And Reagan administration comes over, and his first 2 years were kind of abysmal because he's changing policy, changing how the economic policies, but it was like right at the tail end of that second year where things started to take off a lot, and you started to see some economic growth through that.
But there was like an intentional bottoming out that like was part of the plan.
Yeah. And I do, our Constitution, one of the things that it calls out is to provide for the defense of the nation. That's not exactly how it's worded.
Common defense.
Common defense. I knew common. I knew common was in there, but I was trying to go to Commonwealth. I was like, no, that's wrong. And so I'm obviously a former military guy. I still work for the government and for the Department of Defense, Department of War. So I believe strongly in that. It would be very difficult for me to work for the Bureau of Alcohol and Firearms and tobacco and explosives, or for the FDA or something, because I don't see those as being in necessarily the Constitution, at least how they're called out.
Correct. Yeah.
All this to say, Reagan built up the military really big, and we went into a lot of government debt because of that. So it's like I see both sides of that equation. I don't know. It is a quandary for me to think through, what's the best path forward.
And I think the thing that you have to keep in mind when you do this is, is this one outcome worth breaking up a system that has protected us from outright violence for a long time? When I talk through history, one of the things I think that I am most proud of as an American is not the first election when we get Washington or when we reelect him. It's when you get later on the election of 1800, I believe it is. I'm going to get this wrong and somebody's going to fire off a heater in the comments.
Mr. Mao.
Yeah, there we go. Oh, yeah. If you're out there, just go ahead and fire that thing off. Let's get that keyboard smoking. But the first time we had a change of power from the Federalists to the Democratic Republican Party, when we went from Adams to Jefferson, it was the first time that power peacefully changed hands, and it did that for a very long time.
Ideological differences.
To ideological differences, and that's a beautiful system that we change power without sword, and that was established by the Constitution and by the character of those men to allow that process to go through, even though Adams in a lot of ways did not handle that very well. He allowed the transition of power to happen, and that has ballots stop a whole lot of bullets whenever people think the system's run the way it's supposed to run in that regard. And so is this one outcome, even if I find the outcome to be deplorable, what we get, worth overthrowing a constitutional order that has protected tons of lives, if that makes sense?
I think from Obama to Trump, and then definitely from Trump to Biden, there were issues in the turnovers of power. If you look at both of those, those things, neither one of those administrations handled that well.
No, and I think it got progressively worse, obviously, in my mind, with the whole January 6th thing. So I don't want to be one that, I feel like we have said things that have gone negatively, maybe toward more liberal policies here, but on the Republican side, the way that transition of power happened without, I think, did not reflect the American experience very well, and set a precedent for what could be worse things in the future.
Yeah, I think you do have to balance it. But if I had said what I'm about to say 3 years ago, people would look at me like, you're just a conspiracy theorist. But I think there's pretty good evidence that there was a lot of voting fraud that's coming to light. You can agree or disagree. Those words I'm trying to say. But Georgia itself has come out and said, we had 385,000 I think is the number. Keyboard warriors can look that up too. That were falsely certified, and I think to flip that was only like 11,000 was needed or something like that. So I get what you're saying. I feel that, but I guess you have to weigh that. I think what you're saying is the peaceful transfer of power is more important than winning a single election. However, if that trend were to continue, that every election was stolen after that, I know some people might object to that. That would also be a bad outcome.
I don't disagree. I think to make remarkably, there's a difference in how, and I don't know the whole process. There's some good conservative minds who used to work in election policies. One of them being Eric Erickson, who I don't agree with on a whole lot of things, but he was a lawyer who dealt with elections in Georgia, and he has said, as a card-carrying Republican, much more than I would be, that the results were the results, and that what happened didn't change it. Now, I don't know why. I think if you're going to make remarkable claims, it needs to come with remarkable evidence to overthrow an election. And I think we went through something like 40 Supreme Court cases challenging the results of election. Most of them went through a conservative, Trump or Bush appointed justice at some level of the court system, and they all said these cases don't qualify. And so we went through a whole process, and then they just said the outcome is what it is. So we can agree to disagree on that, and that's fine, but that's kind of where I would come from.
Yeah, and I think I could be wrong, because I didn't deep dive into this.
Right.
But from what I did dive into, I think most of it was like technical things, like they weren't necessarily saying that the vote was good or bad. They're like, we're a federal thing and states can declare their own electorates. It's not in our purview to get into that. So if Georgia says this is their electorate. Who are we to say otherwise? Is that?
I would have to look into it further.
Yeah.
And that's so
so I
tricky.
wish I showed up ready to go
Yeah.
for that. But
Yeah,
You did not-
this wasn't on my radar that we were going to get here. But
Might be a good time to jump to, just for sake of time, to get
Yeah,
through all these.
yeah.
But that opens up a whole other quandary. It's like states' rights. It's like, is that a good thing or not?
Right.
You know, it's like, other problems. The second question, a little bit of change of pace. Should pastors speak directly about candidates or only stay in the lane of biblical principles? Can they make that connection? Is it only certain times, certain things? Because I think what you find, you look out, some evangelicals, man, they're preaching candidates like that's it. And then some places, we're just going to stay so out of politics. We don't even want to make application in that direction.
It would take exceptional circumstances for me to be comfortable with a pastor speaking about a specific candidate from the pulpit rather than expounding the Word of God. Like that there would have to be something pretty wild going on for me to be like, yes, let's.
This is great.
Because
The election cycle is dictating my worship service.
Because the weight of what is on a pastor's shoulders when he gets in that pulpit and when he uses the whole counsel of God to exhort the body of Christ, there is weight to that doesn't allow for some of those maybe more personal, more subjective choices. That's where I would come from.
I think you have to distinguish between speaking about a candidate versus speaking about a policy. And I know this is slippery grounds because you could consider, and here's what I'm going to say. If the Bible's very clear on an issue, we should be clear on an issue. And I think sanctity of life is one of those things that the Bible's very clear on. And so I think it is perfectly within the context of it's coming, obviously we're fans of exegetical preaching here, and if there's some verse that somehow hits on that issue and we want to touch on that, the Bible I think is clear on that, and let's be clear on that. Or even if it goes the other way, more in a leftward direction.
Yep.
If the Bible's clear on an issue, let's be clear on an issue, but let's be much more humble about situations where the Bible is not clear.
No, I love that so much. There's this guy, Michael, here we talk about sometimes, Andy Naselli. He's written a couple books. He's got some good stuff. He would call it like a straight line issue versus like a jagged line issue, where you can string some biblical arguments together about certain economic policy, but it's probably not going to come organically out of the text, whereas sanctity of life, these things come organically. And, you can have a men's group that meets and talks politics, but, we're a Sunday morning, we're driven by the word and sticking to truths, and maybe some of that's straight line versus some jagged line you don't delve into.
Correct, and but I do think if we're looking through some of these Old Testament texts, we're dealing with the Canaanites, and they're talking about Molech or something like that. There's a realistic place where we can say this is application of this text in our modern time, and we need to be clear on this and speak in truth on an issue that's important.
Totally.
And so, but I think that's being loyal to God, not being loyal to a candidate. I think when you stand up there and speak specifically on a candidate, you put yourself in very dangerous waters. And I will say this, though. My concern is, am I only willing to speak out where the Bible's clear on situations that work well for my political leanings?
Yeah, that's tempting.
Am I doing the same thing if there's an issue that I think, and coming from a conservative background, I can't think of one off the top of my head, and I'm sure somebody will let me know in the comments there, of a situation that goes the other way, that the left would be correct on, and that we should speak out on it from the pulpit.
Well, the biggest issue I think that's going to be in that zone is probably something like immigration, where you're gonna wrestle back and forth, and if we're gonna be good to come from Scripture, that may be something that steps on some of the further right toes more than it does on the further left toes.
I think so. And taking care of orphans, widows, these things too. It's like how much
things that get labeled by the very far right as like socially progressive, which may or may not be socially progressive in terms of that kind of loaded political terminology.
Totally agree. I will also comment, if you're not watching the YouTube feed, you should. Michael made a
Michael's
face.
is
So
here.
do you want to?
It's good for all things.
No, I want to go back to the first question
Great.
because I agree with all what the three of you said, but I do want to nuance it. I first want to, if I'm answering it as an elder, a congregant, then I answer it exactly as you answered it. If I answer it from a policy point of view, should a pastor legally be able to say the things, then I would say yes. I think that I am such an advocate for free speech, and there's this growing thing that has somehow come into the culture that you cannot be tax-free and talk about a candidate, and that's just demonstrably false. There's a lot of tax-free PACs that support candidates and stuff. So I don't know why that would be extended to an organization like that and not to a church. And I have watched videos from more left-leaning churches where they are bringing a candidate on stage and stuff. And I'm not advocating for that. I don't think that's wise, but I don't think our government should be stopping that either. But I'm with you as a congregant.
That's a good
I think that's
distinction.
Not good.
I don't think any of us would be like, hey, we're going to legislate this. You know?
I would stay out of that regard, but I would say feeling the weight of the significance of the institution and your role as a pastor, I would try to steer free of specifically endorsing candidates one way or another. However, as a policy for the country, that's where I would wholeheartedly agree with you, that you're in dangerous waters if you start to levy financial penalties for how a place of worship operates.
For sure.
Yeah. And there have been people who have suggested that a particular right-leaning church loses their tax-exempt status for promoting a particular candidate. I'm like, whoa, where are we getting this from?
And that's
crazy
place
to me. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. All right, good.
Yeah, that's great. Let's keep marching along. We're getting some good questions here. Is Trump an example of God using a flawed leader for good purposes, or the church is compromising for political gain? And that's really
it can only be those two. There can be
You know what I want to do here? Here's what I want to do. And I'm not sure if I'm allowed to do this. I'm going to go rogue, and I'm going to absolutely mutiny here. And you are lobbing absolute heaters all the way down this way. So, Zach, how do we feel about this here, sir?
I did say I was like going to just pull the pin on the grenade and throw it. I think this question is probably like many of the other questions where the answer is
Yep.
a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
You can ask Gilbert. I wrote it down right here. The answer to that question is yes.
Oh, I got it right. I think it's disingenuous to really be like, nope, it's all this way and none of that
100%.
way.
Yeah.
And I think as you talk about it, maybe certain things lean in one direction. You don't want to
Well, your view of the sovereignty of God influences the way that you answer that question, right? Because if you have a sovereign God. You even think of somebody like microcosm this. You think of somebody like Paul telling one of his churches, "Hey, I heard that people are preaching the gospel just to kind of tick me off that they're doing it and I'm not." And he's like, "The gospel's going out. God is orchestrating those circumstances, and we have so much. The whole counsel of Scripture tells us that God, we have to have this category for God that He can." Ordain that sinful things happen and himself not be sinful, and he gets good and glory out of those things.
That is so
the death
good.
of Christ being the kind of ultimate example.
The whole Bible is full, basically, you have God saying he's using Assyria to bring punishment upon Israel. It does not excuse Assyria for being a disgusting regime, if that makes sense. And so we want to make sure that in saying this, we can say God is sovereign over circumstances. This is a group of reformed dudes here, so it'd be really weird if that's not the side we come down on.
Actually.
But ultimately,
he's out of control.
But ultimately, not come down on the side that he should not be held responsible, and that our job as a church is not to hold him accountable and say he has behaved in ways that are beneath the office.
I love it. It's such a good reformed answer because it's like God's sovereign and you're responsible. It's like the same.
Done. Move on. Next
it's
question.
the metronome going off in my brain as I'm reading scripture. There we go.
Yeah. I will say that I feel like I have to keep saying this. There are a lot of things about Trump I don't like, but I think I like Trump a lot more than you three do. I think that's
safe to say.
Correct. You can't see the bronze statue of him that's back there. Yeah.
Yes, I don't have a gold statue. It's just a bronze statue.
We have limits in this place.
No, and I think I personally liked him in the first term better, although I think the tariffs were genius, from what I understand. You're looking at me like maybe I'm crazy.
I'll be honest with you, and I don't know how much you want to go down this road. I am an old school free market guy, and I describe myself as a reluctant libertarian, which there's not many of us. Most libertarians only want to tell you about that. That's not me. Well, yeah, and hey, I have basic policies on this, but then let's definitely get into drug policy. That's not me. Okay, that's not me at all. So I'm the weirdest type of libertarian in that regard, and I'm a free market guy, so no, I don't. Feel
Yeah,
some need about
Michael
tariffs.
like hates the free market.
No, no.
kidding.
It's like asking. I 100% agree with you. It's like someone saying, and we just talked about this in the episode that hit today about capital punishment. I like free market so much that I want tariffs to punish countries who are punishing us until they bring down their tariffs. Does that make sense? Because right now we're currently paying tariffs on all of our
race of
imports.
tariffs.
This is the economic nuke that we're dropping here. It's not the way I would handle it, but that's
But
me.
last episode you said if a candidate can get someone's vote and it's for sure, then they don't have to pander to that particular group of people anymore.
Sure.
And I think if the same thing's the same way, if we continue to pay tariffs on stuff that we are exporting, but we don't do anything to stop it, then I think those countries just, okay, we'll continue to do those things. But anyways, I'll just say I agree that God used Nero, as bad as Nero was, to bring about his purposes.
Yep.
And that's what we would all agree about the sovereignty of God. So, yeah.
That's great.
So you can just cruise right on to the next question. We settled that one. It's in the pocket.
Guys, we're nailing it. Did Trump? We kind of jumped into this a little bit last time, but did Trump's support from pro-lifers in the last election help or hurt the movement long term? You feel like the pro-life movement's set up for much more success now, or did it take a hit along the way?
If you're into utilitarian, abortions have gone up since Roe v. Wade.
Correct.
Because in order to get around states making it illegal, they have been mass nailing out and making the abortion pill easier. So if you count a day after pill as abortion, which I don't know some people take those. I think there may be people who just take it without knowing whether they actually conceived or not, and that may get counted as a false positive. So I don't know if we really know those numbers. But I think there is some work to rein that back in because it's explicitly illegal, but it's not being enforced right now. So I think it's still an open debate. I think it makes it, me personally, easier to attack it at a local level. Maybe we come in eventually and make some federal laws in the other direction, but I think that'll be a long time for that gets passed.
Because I think a lot of states are moving legislation that tightens the restrictions on abortions, right?
What we've had happen is the conservative states have gotten more conservative, as far as I can tell, and they've gone one way, and more liberal states have gone the other way and made it easier, and have at times tried to put in policies that would cause people to come in from out of state to get abortions. And so what I don't think gets said here, and this is going to come into play, I think, as we think about the role of government is, and this is David French talking through this, and David French.
Michael loves David French. Michael loves him.
And I knew this was going to cause a problem here, and obviously on the interwebs here, because he said something that I think even you will go along with.
Probably.
Here, go ahead.
If he said it 10 years ago or later, I probably agree with it. It's just like the last 10 years that he's gotten a little
This
whack.
one's recent.
Okay.
But he said we have thought a whole lot about kind of limiting supply of abortions and not thought about limiting demand.
That's
for them.
great. That's
and
great.
so ultimately
Right,
trying
really
to think through as a church, this is going to be weird, but here we go. Go with me here. Okay. I guess Tocqueville. Tocqueville was a French diplomat of some sort who was going through America in the early stages of America. And the thing
blew his mind.
What?
America blew his mind.
Yeah, because he's used to like everything going top down, because he's coming from French society where it's like, no, the elites, in particular the government, makes decisions and everybody underneath kind of goes along with that. But when I go to America and he's like, and I see problems in local towns, the local people start to just say, okay, well, we'll fix the problem. And he's just like, this is wild, man. People at the bottom are doing things to fix it. It's this kind of American ethos, if you will. Did I use that one right there, Sam? There we go. Okay, you used that one earlier and I want to make fun of you, but now I've used it. So I can't do it now. I'm stuck. Okay, and I also said, I've said some
words.
Yeah, there we go. My apologies.
You said some words. You heard it here.
Indeed. So, that should be the summary of the podcast. We said some words. Okay. But anyway,
Middling institutions is where you're going.
there we go. Okay. Now, so my thing is at the lower end, in local situations, particularly in our churches, are we making the thought of abortion more unthinkable by how we approach people who are 16 and just made the biggest mistake of their life? They feel like, or are we not? Are we are we providing? So if we don't want the government to handle kind of prenatal policies, things like that, whatever, is there? Or do we as a local body of Christians care enough to solve that problem bottom up so that abortion, if it's going to be legal in some states, because if we punted it back to the states, it's going to be legal and it's going to be pretty common in certain areas. Have we made it to where the demand lessens? Because we make it more unthinkable because we're saying, hey, we're going to be as a local community providing on a local scale in a way that we can't necessarily always scale up to make sure that you have the things you need so that you can love this person made in the image of God.
That's amazing.
I was waiting for the David French quote.
But that was the supply versus demand issue.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That was his, so I didn't want to steal that thing.
Yeah,
I think that's a good way of explaining
That is a great way.
I think that is good. There's a guy that, man, he gets brought up a lot on this podcast, but he has Greg Cole with Scott Klusendorf. They have a training series called "Making Abortion Unthinkable," which I don't know if you knew that or you
I
just
did not
use
know
those.
that.
No.
I didn't know that.
But it is definitely geared towards that, like helping. See, and I see people who, I watch reels occasionally, and you see these people with like these placards out, and they're getting a lot of interest. But I think some of that, obviously they're not changing everyone's minds, but I think they do have I do see clips where people are thinking through their position, going, maybe I have thought about this wrong.
It is getting harder and harder to just you have to willfully turn a blind eye to science, which is the god of the secular world, right? So when you can kind of talk about it in scientific terms, like, and that's what they're doing with their placards out there. They're going, look at what this is at 4 weeks in the womb.
And people will say, that's an AI generated image. Fetuses do not have hands and fingers. And I'm like, what
kind of
Right.
This is documented.
Yeah.
But that is part of that. That's a big pro-life movement, is to make it unthinkable.
It's two steps. I gave one, which I think is, if we care about this issue deeply, be more compassionate personally and in our institutions. But on the other side, also speaking truthfully about what we're doing when we abort a child.
Both these things.
And both those things must happen.
Yep.
And I will say this, and forgive me, we're on time, but
we got 3 more hours. So
there we go. Good. Well, let's get after it then. Let's buckle up, people. Okay, let's do this. I worry about Trump and the pro-life issue because he is very much so waffled on it. With policy
that
in
is
Florida.
concerning.
Yeah.
And my thing is, as he waffled, the pro-life movement attached himself to him more strongly because they were basically saying he's 1% less bad than the other side, and thus we must go with him. But going back to what I said before, if you make your vote a guarantee, you do not make them make concessions to you. And I feel like in the last election, when the pro-life movement attached himself to a president who voted against whatever the pro-life amendment was that was going on in Florida, forgive me, I don't remember it well, but he voted against that and basically was saying, like, I don't want to make a national policy on this. That should be something that pro-lifers should say. You should
really
perk up and say, hey, this is what our institution's for. And if we cease to be about that in pursuit of political power, we've lost what we are as an institution, what we care about most. And that's the problem with having a guy that a lot of people don't like that behaves in odious ways at times because he kind of poisons what I think is good policy.
Yeah, what's the quote he has? Like, I could shoot someone in the middle of the day and whatever. It's like, it'll be fine.
I don't know this quote.
Oh, yeah, he said it. Yeah, this is before he's running in 2016. He said, my supporters would support me if I shot somebody in the middle of Times Square or something like that.
Oh.
Someone would be campaigning harder for him.
People are like, I love that.
Yeah, I'd love to hear the context on that. I
don't think it'll help you.
I think he was.
Well, what if someone said, let's not pursue
I did
that
not mean
rabbit
to.
hole. I think my reading of the tea leaves is that Trump is the businessman, and I see a very clear difference to me between first-term Trump, second-term Trump. First-term Trump, he is still pandering a little bit to pro-life, and I think he's making a deal like, hey, I will give you what you want if you give me the power to make the economic policies that I want. And I think we got some of that. Second term,
it's him.
He doesn't have to pander us anymore.
So there's no more elections. It's a tragedy of a lame duck candidate.
Well, there's no more elections.
That would be the hope. I tried very hard to not lob the next grenade.
He has talked a lot about some extra time in the big house.
And I think that Trump is probably I think he's probably somewhere pro-life, but not pro-life from a principle, but from I think he probably is not informed. He's an old guy. He gets science wrong every now and then. So, and he's probably got too much ego to get informed. He probably thinks he knows everything that he needs to know.
100%. And there was a pretty famous moment when he ran the first time where he basically said publicly, like he was just kind of on one of those moments there, and he's talking through the pro-life issues, and he speaks it as like a second language because it's clearly not something he ever really, I don't think he ever really cared about it personally. Yeah. He made a transactional relationship, and he said something effective, and we want to lock up the women who get abortions, and he heard the crowd groan because it's the second language, and and everybody just went, ooh, and then all of a sudden he's like, oh, I did a stupid there. And so you kind of caught him like clearly not understanding the nature of most pro-lifers and what they actually believe. And
we want to lock up the doctors that perform it.
Pardon us, I missed that.
We want to lock up the doctors who perform it.
That would be we get into complex issues here.
It would at least make it. Yeah. All right. So
it would make it more unthinkable.
Yeah. Yes, it
That's
would
true.
be.
It's great. We made it through a lot. We didn't. I mean, he's given us like UFO stuff though. That's pretty cool, right?
Yeah,
We're like learning, So like, who's loving those grainy pictures that you can like see something.
It was so
kind
anticlimactic. Although we do have a mutual friend, at least 3 of us do, who is like, man, making theories about what we have seen so far. So
I will marvel at this though, just as a human. Like it's like whenever that whole thing came out, and they're like, "Hey, like the Pentagon's going to release some UFO information," and everybody was just kind of like, "Yeah," and they're like, "Hey, aliens may exist. We have this stuff we can't explain," and everybody just going, "What's next? Like, what are we doing?" Because like there was just so much going on that like that was just seemed like whatever. That's not even good news for us. That's not something we could really sink our teeth into.
Everything that I've seen though, I feel like I've seen maybe not that thing, but something of the same kind. I'm like, is this really the? I work for the government, and there are things that are classified that I'm like, why is this classified? And there's things that aren't classified. I'm like, why isn't this classified?
It should be classified.
And we don't always get to make those calls. So yeah,
man, it's great. Maybe if we keep asking for the Epstein files, we'll get more UFO stuff. It'll be good, So it's good. Well, great, good way to close out. We got one more episode on politics. So let's wrap it up again with our 2 guests. You guys are going to get sick of, closing us out and opening us up.
It's funny that every time we get to this point, my mind starts racing and like, what is the thing? What's the thing that we're supposed to say?
And he's filibustering right now so that I remember because every time I know it's coming. And I'm still like terrified. So I think I got it. There we go. Yeah, that's the one. That's the one. Which, by the way, in case y'all don't know this I came with absolutely nothing in front of me, and I've slowly moved this paper toward me, and then I felt bad, and I've slowly bunched it back this way. So perfect microcosm of our relationship.
Sounds good. Well,
that's our take.
Thanks for listening to Take 2. Find us wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube for those who want to watch our videocast.